Good day, people. This is Ed Moran from Visionary AI Partners. Today, we are talking to Ken Houbolt, president of HRE Real Estate Services. Over 30 years in business, does commercial investment, property management. He is right outside Chicago, Illinois, and he is here to talk to us about what's going on in his industry, his company in particular, and how things are going. Hello, Ken. How are you doing?
Hey, Ed, how are you? Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us about yourself, your company, and what's going on today?
Yeah, sure. So we started in 1991, and we started out as a real estate company for residential. Kind of worked the southwest side of Chicago and the southern suburbs, which we still work today. Our goal basically was to get as many sales as we could on a part-time basis. I worked for a little company called Coca-Cola at the time, and so I was working on the truck, then working my way up through management. But I always kept a real estate license and kind of thought, if I could make a couple extra bucks selling real estate, it would help. And really, at the time, I didn't have a plan to where we were going to go. But we slowly grew the business into. We brought on a couple different agents, and we were able to grow the business into the fact that we were doing maybe 20 closings a year, and for a part-time basis, that we thought that was pretty good. Fast forward to 2006. We started, or really 2004 rather, we started flipping some houses, moving a lot more properties, and up until 2007, 2008, we were doing 4 or 5 houses at a time. In the meantime, also selling residential properties. In 2008, right before the downturn, we had about 7 houses. We finished them up, sold them all, and I asked my wife if I could take off the summer to play one more 16-inch softball. Something you guys don't have out there, but out here. But that's why we got messed up fingers and everything else. But that's a different story for a different time.
Yes.
So I stopped, and I was doing a little commercial work at the time. And of course, we had the downturn that happened, and I didn't want to be listing a bunch of houses that nobody wanted. So I started doing a little commercial work. Was able to get really lucky as it was that we were able to sell a shopping mall in Aurora, which is in the western suburbs, and started, after working with one of the agents from CBRE, one of the big boys in the commercial business, I said, this isn't really that hard, man, but I need to learn more if I'm going to service my customers the right way. So I went and got my CCIM and did a couple other classes for commercial real estate, and then we started doing commercial real estate in 2008, and we've kind of focused on, really, when it comes to commercial real estate, there's either focus in one area. You might say, okay, I only sell gas stations throughout the state of Illinois. Or you might work in a region or an area. So we kind of do a little bit of everything from industrial, retail, multifamily, land in the southern suburbs of Chicago. And that's sort of how we do our business. So our business that's the thing I really like, is that we're constantly working on new projects. Somebody will call and say, I've got this type of business or this type of property to sell. And we, as a team, we have to bring in all the information together so that we can service that client as well. We kind of work in the 0 to 5 million range for the types of properties that we deal with. And so we've done quite well with that. And in the meantime, we've also started in 2008, we started doing property management. We've grown that to about 650 doors that we manage. Everything from residential to commercial to a couple single family houses that we do. So it's quite, that keeps us busy on a day-to-day basis. It's rewarding, but it's hectic, and it's 6-7 days a week that we're working in. And we have a good team, a maintenance team. We have about 15 employees, as well as an office. We have another 5 employees working there. So that really keeps us busy. And then recently we just started doing some developments in the light industrial area, where we're building warehouses out in Will County, again, which is a little bit further south of the city. And it allows we're going to build and hold on those. So that's kind of a long-winded snapshot of what we do.
Okay. Where you're at now, you said you're getting involved in some of these new developments. Is it industrial mostly, or?
Right now, they're proposed to be about 1,500 square foot units. We just had a meeting yesterday where somebody wanted to come in and possibly take the whole building out and make them 6,000 units too. The one sweet spot that we find out in this area is that the 3,500 to 6,000 square foot, we really don't have a lot of those warehouses available. When you get up by O'Hare Airport, which is north of the city, you do find a few up there, but really that's one thing that's lacking in the market. We had thought we'd do the 1,500 square feet units and then maybe pivot to something bigger and can. So it's under works. We're trying to figure out exactly what we want to do and what the customer wants. So at the end of the day, that's what we do. We work for the customer, and after our meeting yesterday, if I talked to you the day before yesterday, I'd have a totally different answer for the industrial. But that's what we're working on. So we're at that point where we can pivot if we need to.
Is that where you're seeing in your area right now with the 1,500 to size?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at everything, look at residentials today on CNBC. They just came out and said that new home construction was up 20%, and so it was 800,000 homes were sold last month, and they were predicting like 660,000 across the country. So when you see that, then you know that the residential market's going to probably bust loose a little bit, and then the nice thing about commercial is that I don't think it mirrors it at all. And when you look at, our challenge is when we're looking at sales and buyers and sellers from residential, it's totally different for buyers and sellers in the commercial side. So to answer your question is that, yes, I think we see that we do an extensive leasing of 1,500 square foot units, smaller units. In fact, we're sitting in one right now. Is our office is a warehouse, and that allows us to use it as a model, if you will. So people come in, they say, okay, I got a couple offices in here. We've got a loft upstairs that can be used for storage, more offices, whatever it might be. Our bathrooms are laid out and whatnot too. So so I do see there's a need for the 1,500 square feet as well as the 3,500 or 4,000 to 6,000 square feet. And so we're constantly getting calls for that. But we're just a little guy. We can only build so much at a time.
That is true. And so what you're saying is you're seeing the trend right now kind of in that 1,500. So you're hitting that strong, but there is also still the bigger 3,500 and up type.
Right. If you think about the type of businesses and the 1,500 square feet, you would have electricians, tradesmen and small wholesalers. I used to be in the distributing business years ago, and we had a unit just like we have here. Again, it's just enough storage to move in and move out too. You look at HVAC guys. In our complex here, we have 9 units. 3 of the 9 are HVAC guys. So it's enough for storage. It's enough for to put their parts in and whatnot too, so they can work efficiently. And at the same time, it's not, they're not overburdened with the big unit.
Do you have multifamily or more bigger units for residential too at all, or are you mostly concentrated on the commercial?
Well, the multifamily, anything that's 5 or more, we consider to be commercial. And the one thing about the market here is that once a 6 unit or a 12 unit comes available, they usually go relatively quick, especially if they're priced right. Like anything, if it's priced right, if it's in good condition, we've got a 5 unit now that we're dealing with that we listed. We got in the first week we got 13 offers on it, all above asking price. But when we did the inspection, we found a lot of things that needed to be corrected, which happens a lot. The owner's out of town, lives in California, didn't know what was going on with his building. So we were able to work with him, get it through. We're working through some of the problems, and we'll get it back up. And at the end of the day, we'll get the building sold for him in a profitable manner. But at the same time, we got to sell a product to the buyer that's safe, up to code, and they're not throwing a bunch of money in after, it's not a money pit, if you will, after they take it over.
How's Illinois with, well, you guys dealing with having to meet the standards for the state, and probably not so much federal, but state issues?
That's a good question. So some of the municipalities and some of the suburbs of Chicago require inspections. This one town that we're dealing with, which is 15, 20 minutes from our location, requires a inspection. So it should come up when the building gets sold. Some of these are going to come up as well, but you want to prevent that beforehand. So when the inspection was done by the buyer, we're going to make those corrections beforehand. There's if you deal with an experienced broker, there's ways to have those done after you purchase it, but it's the correct paperwork and getting it through to get those done. We try to get it done before we put it on the market. But there's sometimes you don't know anything's wrong with it until the inspector comes in. You can only see so much with eyes and ears. So we're definitely going to always try to get that beforehand. If by chance the seller's not willing to make those changes, we're still going to try to get the deal done. But we're going to disclose to everybody what's wrong with the property.
Are the regulations burdensome or really strict?
No, I would say that they're fair for both sides. And I think anytime you do business, it's got to be that way because, either if the pendulum swings one way or the other, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the community. It's going to hurt the properties. It's going to hurt values. And in the long run, that's going to hurt you in the long run. So why not just, see what's wrong with it, attack it and be wrong with it? You find more I hate to say the word ridiculous or the over caution things on new construction. We find that when we're developing, sometimes it'll be more than the town is looking for more than the developer can actually do. For an example, a few years ago, we were trying to build a few townhomes, and they wanted us to build a road next to the property, which wasn't ours. And it was $1 million to put the road in. When you're building 10 townhouses, that's $100,000 per townhouse. So therefore that project wasn't able to go forward. That was an example of being trying to overexert their presence on there too.
But that's for the town, correct?
Yeah. So that was the benefit to town. And if we were building 100 houses, then it'd be a little bit different to do that. But when you're only building 10, it becomes cost prohibitive.
Okay. Yeah. Can you dive into a little bit deeper on the difference between like the state regulations and issues you're dealing with the town? Because I would imagine state this is it, but you're dealing with different towns and different issues with each town.
Yeah, we really don't deal, to be honest with you, we really don't deal with the state. Like on multifamily, the boilers we have state, we have inspections for that. But when you're buying or selling a property, you don't really deal with the state. You'll deal with you may deal with the town, and not all towns have that. Around here we probably have 50 suburbs that we deal with, and I would probably say a quarter to a third of them have regulation that they have inspectors that come out and do inspect the property before it's sold. Having said that, but there's the MLS and the regulations that we have when we go through about disclosing what's wrong with a property, using the disclosures, especially on multifamily. Other commercial properties, you don't have to use certain disclosures, but on multifamily, especially, you're reporting lead-based paint, you're reporting radon, you're reporting the condition of the property, what's wrong with it, and things like that too. So for those that don't have in-house inspectors or second-party inspectors, that's pretty much all that's required. When you deal with the inspectors from the town, I would say that they're looking to make sure that the property's safe and up to code when it comes to. Most of them, 90% of them or higher, are just doing the job, getting it done, and they'll work with you on there. So if you work with them, and it's like anything else. So at the end of the day, I would say it's not a bad thing. It's definitely a good thing if it's done the right way.
Okay. Thanks for going a little deeper on that for me. On your properties themselves, how is it dealing with something goes wrong? Boiler breaks, the process of going through that. Can you go into that a little bit? How you guys deal with it?
Absolutely. My number one word for business is communication. The biggest thing is to communicate. When somebody calls and says, my sliding door is not working right, or they call and say, my toilet's overflowing right now, I always say, thank you for letting me know, and then this is what we're going to do to get that corrected on there. So whether you're working with a tenant, an owner, an inspector, it's all about communication. And once we identify the problem, we're going to let them know exactly what the problem is, and then we're going to tell them this is how we're going to try to fix it. We're going to have if it's where we have in-house staff, we're going to have somebody over within a day. Depending upon what the problem is, and then we're going to tell them what's rectified. And once it's fixed, we follow up with a call. Is everything going good? Is the toilet working properly? Is the sliding door working properly? And we use technology. One of the things that when we took over our biggest property, which has over 500 doors, is that we started using AppFolio, and that keeps track of what was on. So if it's a tenant that's going to keep calling on the same problem, we can say, hey, you called on August 1st, September 1st, October 1st. And, we've done everything we can. There's nothing else we can do. It also helps control costs. It also helps control, our customer service. That we try to keep it at a high level. And definitely when you talk to the tenants and you have that backup, again, with, nearly 700 properties, it's hard for us to, keep them all on track. With that, I can look and say, okay, this is what was done here. We had, Bob was there on Friday and he did this. Joe was there on Monday. He did this. So, are we missing something? And often we'll bring together the team. With the big property, we have a chief and two assistant chiefs. Maybe we bring the two or three of them together and say, hey, this is what we got going on here. What's a better way we can do this? So again, it all comes down to communication. We can do that between everybody, between our office, the team, our team of maintenance, and the customer or the owners. We can definitely, it improves everything. So communication is our biggest thing. We haven't had a problem that we haven't been able to fix. Sometimes it takes a couple of days, but at the end of the day, we can get it done.
And how are you doing mostly that communication? You talked about phone calls, where you like emailing, or you?
Yeah, so when we use AppFolio, if you were to call in and it said, at 123 Main Street, we've got a stove that's not working. So we put it in there, and then it tells who we assigned it to, what time it was assigned, and they get it on their phone and says, okay, over at 123 Main, I got to go see Ed. His stove's not working. And then they'll go in, they'll look at it, and they'll say, okay, the igniter wasn't working. We replaced the igniter, and we were done at 2:00 on Wednesday. So that was done. Another thing that we do is we implement it. We have a thing called robocalls that we use. In fact, if we're going to shut down the water at a building, or we're going to turn down the power, or the lift might be out because we're working on it, we'll do a robocall to that building. Other times, if we see issues that are commonplace, and we think everybody needs to know about it, we'll use a robocall to call all the units, let them know, please do not be putting grease down the traps anymore, down your sinks and whatnot. So things like that, maintenance things. Sometimes at the larger things, there might be an event going on. We've got flu shots coming up in one of them, so we let everybody know there's free flu shots from the local drugstore that are going to be on next week. So that was one we just did this week.
Oh, that's a little extra. That's nice. So what do you see going really good for your company now, and what after that follow up, or vice versa, what's been really frustrating?
I think the frustrating part is financing for commercial deals. The banks, as opposed to 5, 6, 7 years ago, where they're calling you looking for deals, it's hard to get a deal through unless it's perfect. If Joe that comes in and wants to buy a building, he's got an 800 score, he's putting 50% down, and he owns 7 other multifamily buildings, then the bank says, yeah, bring Joe over. We'll take care of him. But when you got Bob that comes over and says, hey, you know what? I'm working a full-time job. I got a couple kids in college, but I want to buy a 3 flat or a 5 flat. I can afford it, but it's not perfect. The bank's going to take a pass on that. And I think there are alternatives out there, hard money lenders and whatnot, but then it becomes cost prohibitive for them to do that. So to me, it hurts the little guy, the guy that's just trying to get into the market and trying to start out in this business. That's difficult for them on there too. So, we've got banks here that we worked with over the past 30 years that might take a look at it, but it's, 5-10 years ago, you were able to say, yeah, we can get this deal done. Here's where we got to go. We got to go see Betty over at, First Savings. And we knew we'd get it done. Today, we have to tell the client, hey, we don't know if we can get this done. This is what we would suggest you do. And sometimes we get it done. So you'll spend a lot of time. We always, have the guy get the client get pre-approved. But that may take time, too, on what's going on. They may be waiting for tax returns like that, too. So it doesn't move as fast as it used to. That's probably the frustrating part.
Are you having trouble getting quality tenants?
Not tenants, but no, because we screen, and the thing about it is that the rental market here in Chicagoland is very strong on the owner side. I know New York's a different story on there. I hear a lot of horror stories there. They've tried the rent control and things here, but knock on wood, they haven't been able to get that done as well. I think one of the things that, like our biggest unit that we just discussed raising our prices again for next year, because when we started 5 years ago, we had about 60 empty units out of 500. Today we average around 5 to 7 per month. And again, it's 55 and older. So, unfortunately people pass, that's usually the majority of how it goes. People love where they're there, and occasionally some people do move out. So it's a owner's market here, and you can pick and choose who the better tenants that you want, and what you require for them to come in.
Okay, nice. And the positive?
The positive is that when you're able to get somebody financed, there's quality properties that are out there. On the residential side, you're seeing the baby boomers that are coming to retire and that had the big houses, the 3, 4, 5,000 square foot houses. For the longest time, they weren't selling them because they couldn't get anywhere near the price that they paid for them. They were upside down. The last few years they have, and then they affect the condo and townhouse market. Is that they sold their big house for anywhere between 600 million plus. Now they go to buy a townhouse. They're cash buyers. So the guy that's trying to buy a condo for the young kid, the young family that's looking to buy the house for the first time, they're going up against, they're putting 3% down. This guy's putting 100% down. So, that affects that market on there too. On the commercial side, I always say if it flows, let it go. What it means is that if you look at a building for what you're going to pay for it, if the cash flow's there, buy it. And if that price works for you selling it, sell it. So it's a numbers game. It's not a commercial. Commercial is really easy when it comes down to the numbers. If, you said I'm looking for 8% on cash return, well, I just try to find you a building that works for you and that meets those parameters. Whereas when you think about a house, I know if I walked into a house and the front door was hanging off, my wife wouldn't even walk in there. But if it's commercial, you're going to say you're going to say, oh, it's $2,000 for a new door. Okay, let's move on and let's go through. So it's a different way they look at it. I think the positive is that even though the interest rates are up, supposedly coming down a little bit, we'll see. Then if the cash flow, if the numbers are there, then it works.
What is the one problem issue, if you could solve right now, what would it be in your industry, in your company?
I think that there's a lot of brokers and agents that were out there that didn't have a lot of experience, and not having the experience of how to do deals. And there was a lot, because in 2020, when they started saying, oh, yeah, the market's picking up again, well, it seems like a lot of people jumped in with to get a license and they started brokering, but they didn't have the experience. So when you're trying to do a deal and the agent doesn't call you back for 3, 4, 5 days, that becomes frustrating because whether you represent a buyer or the seller, you say, okay, I'm calling, but nobody's calling me back. And that's not something that I've experienced a lot over 35 years of doing this. You expect the professional courtesy, things like that. And a lot of it might be that they don't know how to do the deal, and we're always happy to work with the people to get the deal done. But obviously we can't. We're limited on what we can do with the other side.
Yeah, thank you for that. Where do you see yourself going in the next 6 to 12 months?
I wish I could say retirement, but that ain't happening.
That's two of us, brother.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever retire because I always say that we're not digging ditches and we're not bricklaying. So things I've done in the past, but nothing now. So I would say that I'd like to see our property management business grow. I would like to see our development side grow once we get through, because even already being in the development thing for about 6 months, we see a lot of opportunities on there. And so those are ones we like to explore more on there as well. And the longer we're in it, it seems like almost every day, like I mentioned earlier about our project out in Mokina, is that, it might pivot and then too. And that's fun. When you do the same thing, the thing about real estate, you're never doing the same thing day in and day out.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How would you go about moving forward like you want to?
Yeah, I think we find the opportunities and then we find the finance to go along with that. As we go along, we are finding more and more opportunities. It's that we never really looked for those before. Never looked for a buyer or an investor to do, a $10 million warehouse. And so we never really had dealings with that. And now as we learn that's what kind of gets excited that we have the opportunity to do more of these as we go forward.
Okay. All right. You want to expand on that a little bit more, or?
Obviously in real estate, you're in sales, but the one thing that I've never been able to do is ask people to invest in something that, into a real estate project. So I never really did that before. And as we did this first one, it was a little bit, we didn't know which direction to go in. Who do we go ask? Ed does pretty well for himself. Maybe we should go talk to him. And then when you go talk to Ed, Ed says, oh, no, I can't do that. And then when you go talk to, Betty says, yeah, I'm always doing that. Jesus, I known Betty for all these years. I never knew she did that. So it's trying to find the right people to do the right investments. And that's a learning curve for me that I need to work on the next 6 months, 12 months. If we're going to do this, get to the right people with the right thing. We met a gentleman earlier this week that was works with family offices, which is that he controls their investments for large families that have a lot of large wealth. So he's like their personal investment analyst, if you will. And that was a good connection. So I need to find more connections like that as we move forward in order to do that. So, because that's the one part of the puzzle that we don't have. We have all the builders, electricians, concrete, landscapers, whatever we need to build something, we've got that. We've got the plans, we've got the marketing, we know how to do all that, but how do we get it paid for? And that's the one thing that I need to continue to work on, and also part of my team needs to work on as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Listen, anything you want to promote or talk about that we haven't mentioned today?
No, I just think that, we always work with people, especially in the commercial side, across the country. We've done deals, Florida, Denver, California. Yes, people buy in California. So if anybody's out there that's looking at needs help to figure out, hey, I'm looking for the right investment and I have an idea of what I'm looking for, we can definitely help them. If they're just starting out, we can walk them through some of the ideas to help them through. So I would say that's the biggest thing. And then, of course, property management, we got to be local. For us, we have to. I know there's people that do it outside of the state and things, whatnot, and they do it. We like to be able to drive to our properties if we need to. So if you're in the Chicagoland area and you need property management, we're happy to help and take a look. And our motto is that we exceed our clients' expectations. We've been doing it since 1991. We'd love to help whoever needs help. We'd love to help them out as well.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's HRE Real Estate Services in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.